All right, Kara, we're live.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. I'm Kara Dow, Director of Operations for Breakbulk Events and Media. I'd like to welcome you to Breakbulk America's webinar on how to manage your money and measure your performance, value, and ROI. Breakbulk was chosen to invest in your education and trade show knowledge by providing you this online workshop. By participating today, you are taking the right steps towards ensuring your investment at Breakbulk pays off. If you have not already, please check out the Exhibitor Success Training Center on our Breakbulk America's website. In your Success Center, you will find live and replayable webinars, how-to exhibiting articles, measurable tools, and access to trade show expert Q&A services. There is a direct correlation between exhibitors who use these tools and their ROI at events. Thank you for your time, commitment, and partnership with Breakbulk. I will now hand over this program to consultant, speaker, trainer, and author Jefferson Davis from Competitive Edge. His credentials and contact details are on your screen. Thank you, Jefferson.
All right, thank you, Kara. And again, thanks to everybody for logging in. All of us, our hearts and our prayers go out to both, the Houston area with Hurricane Harvey and Irma and the Keys and the Florida and the Caribbean. And so as we start, that's really important for us to think about. We're coming into Houston with the show. Given that the show is in mid-October, hopefully we'll be pretty far out of the woods by then. So let's start off on today's session, inside your exhibiting numbers. We're going to go into measurement, and we're going to go into money management and how to make sure that as an exhibitor you've got these two critical success factors buttoned down for your company. So as we start off, I would like you to think about the big investment of both human and financial capital that you make into trade shows, and think about how that looks right now. For too many companies, the spend outweighs the results that they're getting from the event. So what we want to do really is flip the scale, and we want to make sure that every dollar and every hour that your company invests in Breakbulk events, and for that matter all events you do, that the results heavily outweigh the spend. Okay, so as you think about the big investment that your company's making, and I don't know what your specific job function or what level of management you might be in, but typically your senior executives will be looking at the trade show spend, and the three major questions that they'll be asking is, number one, was the show a success? And if so, how? What did success mean to us? And then second, what impact did the show have on our company and our business? And finally, they want to know what was the show return on investment. Where did the company get measurable value beyond cost? And as a smart exhibit or marketing manager, it's really good for you to understand the questions they'll be asking and to be able to provide the data and the metrics and the feedback, to help them understand the value that you and your department and the exhibit program is delivering for your company. So when an exhibit program is really working properly, there's two very specific outcomes the program should be delivering. Number one, it should be visibly and directly supporting your company's core business objectives. The three major objectives that trade shows best support are marketing, customer relationship management, and sales. So marketing, CRM, and sales. Those are the three biggest. Now, obviously, it can support a lot more objectives, but those are the big three. And the second thing is that it should be delivering value beyond cost. And value comes from many ways, which we're going to talk about in this webinar. There's tangible, and there's financial, and then there's soft dollar value that we get. So I want to walk you through some of the latest thinking and some of the best practices on both of these factors. So, when it starts with exhibiting, I'm referencing a Center for Exhibition Industry study, one of the most comprehensive studies done recently on how exhibitors are measuring ROI and performance. And when you see, the ranking on the screen right now of why companies exhibit, you're seeing that lead generation, brand awareness, and relationship management are the top three reasons. Some companies have that, well, we need to be there as an objective, but between all of us on this webinar, I don't really consider that an objective. I consider that a reason. It's a reason, right? But it's not really an objective. Number 5, launching or promoting a new product is definitely an objective. So what I would like you to think about, and we've talked about this in our previous webinar, and we've got content up on the Exhibitor Success Training Center, is what are your objectives? Why are you exhibiting? I recommend that you have a minimum of 3, and I recommend that you organize those 3 in the order of priority. If I could only do one thing, it would be this. If I could do a second, it would be this. And then if I could do a third, it would be this. Okay? So let's talk ROI here. Let's get into the money side of trade shows, which is why we're on the webinar today. A few questions to kind of prime your mental pump, if you will, is number 1, do you think that it is possible to measure trade show ROI? Is it possible to measure it? I travel around the country over 30 years at trade shows now and talk with tens and thousands of exhibitors. And there are a group of exhibitors out there that are under the belief that it's not something you can really measure. So I'm curious for you what you're feeling about that. Do you believe it can be measured? And second, if you do you measure? Okay, do you currently have ROI and performance metrics in play? And if so, what are you measuring, or how are you measuring? A lot of companies, regardless of size, I work with companies from 10 by 10 booths to 100 by 100 booths. And when I ask them, if your boss walked in and said, hey, we just spent, $100,000 on this show, what did we get, right? And too often I hear things like, well, I can tell him or her how much we spent. I can tell them what we spent it on, where it went. I can tell them how many scans or swipes we got in the booth. I can tell them how many of our customers were at the event and how many we actually interacted with. And those are all good, but I think we got to go a little deeper on that in terms of measurement. So the final kind of question is, what factors do you feel are most limiting your company's ability to get return on investment from trade shows? What do you feel is standing between you and getting ROI? By the way, I would like you to take and go to your question tab and send in what factors. Just kind of type in the factors you feel that are most limiting ROI. And I'll take a look at those as we move on. All right, so let's get into measurement then. Okay, the benefits of measuring really come down to accountability and justification of the investment. It can also help you determine your continued participation in a given show, and it can help you determine your level of investment in a show. For example, if you knew that every dollar and every hour that you were investing into Breakbulk Americas was delivering a 5 or a 10-to-1 return on your investment, how many dollars would you want to invest knowing that? The answer would probably be as many as you can find, right? Because that would be a great return on investment. It'll also help you, really spotlight what's working, the strengths of your program, and it'll also spotlight your gaps or your weaknesses. And finally, the ability to set up a consistent set of metrics or benchmarks and run them across your entire portfolio of shows will give you comparison and spotlights on how to improve. So there's a lot to be gained by putting beyond the basics measurement in play. So let's talk budgeting or money management here for a moment, okay? So, as a starting point, we're all looking at our dollars and where it goes. With the exhibiting program, I think it's a good idea to use zero-based budgeting to justify your expenditures. And that'll typically mean taking a look at each line item on your budget and asking, is this really necessary, right? And maybe how could we do this for a little less and still get the same result that we're looking for? But zero-based budgeting, for example, many times companies will tell me, they'll go, Jefferson, we're spending way too much on a show. And when I go in and I look at their budget, what I found was it wasn't necessarily the show that where all the money was going, but maybe they were sending too many people. It costs a lot to send a person to a show: air, hotel, registration, meals, ground transportation. It's a couple $1,000s per person. And so for many companies, sometimes they're sending too many people who really don't need to be there, and it's adding to the show expense, and yet they're linking it to the show. So zero-based budgeting is a great way to help you look at that. The budgeting rule of thumb, people often ask, how much should we be budgeting for a trade show? And the rule of thumb is floor space cost times 3 to 5. Times 3 to 5. So if your floor space cost was $10,000, minimally your total show budget should be $30,000, ideally $50,000. So floor space times 3 to 5 is the rule of thumb. And there are 3 areas in the budget that really represent the leverage points. The areas that if we can free up some resources to invest a little more in these 3 areas, it'll make all the difference in the world. So number 1 is promoting to drive qualified booth traffic. And we took a very deep dive on that topic on the first webinar we did, which is on the Exhibitor Success Training Center. It's called Increasing Your Brand Awareness and Driving Qualified Booth Traffic. If you haven't watched that yet, I really encourage you to go watch it, because it'll walk you through a step-by-step plan on how to really develop your content, drive more traffic, qualified traffic. Second is delivering a quality visitor experience. And that really comes down to your exhibit, and it comes down to your product, service, presentation, or demonstration. And the third area is in your people, in training your booth staff. Trade shows are different, and most people have not had any professional skills training in how to do it. So they end up making behavioral and communication errors that they're not even really aware that they're making. And these errors can cost you booth traffic. They can cost you lead quantity and quality. They can negatively impact a company's brand perception in the marketplace, and they can limit or block your ability to get return on investment. Because at the end of the day, trade shows are about face-to-face contact with your market, and only your people can manage that part of your program. So make sure that you provide some form of training to your staff. Okay, and then going through, as I mentioned above, as you look at all these different areas, each line item, and looking at it, and is it possible to do this at a lower cost and still get the same or higher value results? Or do we really need to, is this a really necessary spend here? Okay. So as you start to implement zero-based budgeting, though, I do want to put a caution out there. Be very careful about cutting costs in areas that face your customers. What you don't want to do is send a message that your business is in trouble, and you start really cutting out the most important parts of your exhibit program. So avoid cutting those costs in areas that face customers. Okay, where does the dollar go? Budgeting. I think that we should be benchmarking. the average company in North America allocates 41.3% of their annual marketing budget to exhibit and event marketing. 4 out of $10 go there. How much are you allocating and how does it compare? And then that budget is really spent in 8 major areas. Now, these areas have sub-areas, as we'll talk about in a minute. But you can see from exhibit space to the exhibit itself, to transportation, show services, travel and entertainment, advertising and promoting your participation, lead gathering, fulfillment, and exhibit staff training. These represent the major areas. So I wonder if you are categorizing your spend by area, and I wonder if you're benchmarking it also. Okay, so what I'd like to do then is give you a free cost control and tracking tool. You'll see if you go to tradeshowturnaround.com on the product page, you can click on it, then just go to checkout, and you can download it for free, courtesy of the Breakbulk team. This tool, as you can see, is pretty complex. It's got all the major areas. It will automatically build that chart for you right here. Once you put in your numbers, it'll automatically build your chart. And it's got tips for managing the money and reducing costs by area, by major expense area. So make sure to go grab the free tool. No cost at all to you. In your workbook and on the screen here, you'll see that we've included some tips by area, you know, the exhibit, graphics, show services, promotions, and things that can help you save money. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into these here because they're in your workbook, every one of them. But go through them and kind of put a check mark by any of these tips that you feel might be able to help you stretch your dollar a little farther or save some money. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to take a quick look in the question queue, and I'm not seeing any questions yet beyond one of the exhibiting objectives of brand reinforcement. So remember this, there's no such thing as a dumb question today, or any day for that matter. So the moment a question flashes in your mind, go to your queue, type it in, press send. And if the question is something that you want to take offline, you can reach me through the Exhibitor Success Training Center, and you can also reach your Breakbulk America's service team for questions too. All right, so let's get into measurement. Okay, so what are exhibitors measuring? Well, you know, it really found that there's 2 major buckets. There are ROI metrics, and you'll see on the screen that 62% of exhibitors today are trying to measure their ROI, and the 2 most popular that they're using are sales revenue to the cost of exhibiting and sales revenue potential to the cost of exhibiting. When you look at the performance metrics, the research suggests that 86% of exhibitors are now using performance metrics, and the most popular are the number of leads, the number of qualified, and the quality of leads being the top 3. You'll see that meetings with prospects and meetings with customers are also in the top 5 metrics that exhibitors are using today to measure. So what I want to do here is spend the rest of our time together here actually taking you inside of some of these metrics. We're going to hit some financial performance metrics and we'll walk you through the formula so you understand how to measure it. And then we'll hit some of the exhibit performance measurement metrics that you're seeing on the screen here. So let's start off with one of our performance metrics, which is what we call exhibit interaction capacity. Okay, so remember we said trade shows are about face-to-face contact. The reality is you have a limited or a finite amount of capacity for executing face-to-face interactions. I think you should calculate and know what that is. It's going to help you set goals, and it's going to help you measure performance. So the formula works like this. You take the number of exhibiting hours in the show, and Breakbulk Americas has 17. Then you you insert the number of full-time exhibit staff that will be in your exhibit on average over those 17 hours. In my example, I'm using 2, so this would be a small 10 by 10 booth. As you can see, the rule of thumb on the code below is 50 square feet per staffer. So that would give me 34 staff hours. What I want for those 34 hours is my staff face-to-face talking to attendees. So I'm going to set a target number of interactions per hour per staffer. And I recommend you pick from 3 to 5. 3 being conservative, 4 being moderate, and 5 being possibly aggressive. Then lock in on your exhibit interaction capacity. I'm showing you the range here as an example, but I strongly suggest you pick one of those numbers, 3, 4, or 5, as your target number of interaction per hours. Now you know your exhibit interaction capacity. Okay? So what you want to measure then, one of the first things you want to measure is how much of your capacity did you utilize. So if you were able to track 100 exhibit interactions in your booth and you had the capacity for 150, then you utilized 67% of your capacity. So you would want to start looking and wonder why you weren't in the 80 to 100% range. Did you do a pre-show marketing campaign? Was your exhibit well designed? Did it grab attention and communicate what you do and give attendees a reason to stop? Was your booth staff being proactive and engaging? Was your booth staff getting out of conversations that might be going too long? Okay, so once you understand that you fell a little short on your utilization, now you're going to start looking at, okay, what might have caused that shortfall and how do I bridge that for my next show? Exhibit attraction efficiency. This metric will tell you how much of your target audience were you able to attract. So let's say again that you had 100 interactions in your booth, and let's say that you went inside the show attendance numbers and you analyzed using the data provided by Breakbulk, the percentages, the attendance, and the demographics, and you found that there were 400 people in the total show audience that matched your visitor profile. Now you would have been at 25% attraction efficiency. The benchmark, the target, according to exhibit surveys, is 45%. So if you're not attracting and interacting with 45% of your profile match within the total show audience, there's room for improvement. And similar questions would come to play. What did you do in terms of pre-marketing? Did you get in their mind and on their agenda before they showed up? Again, I would be looking at my exhibit. Did it grab attention? Did it communicate? Did it give attendees a reason to stop and engage? And I'd be looking at my booth staff. Did I have enough and were they being proactive? Things like that. But your attraction efficiency, this is a performance metric, not a financial. Okay. Third is your staff interaction rate. And this is trying to assess the number of people that enter your space that are physically engaged by a booth staffer. So in this example, if 120 people visited my booth and we interacted with 100 of them, we were at 83%. My thought on staff interaction is honestly, nobody should enter your booth and exit without being engaged by a staffer. And yet, for some of us, maybe we're in a small booth and we only have 2 people and we get tied up in conversations and we just can't get to them. But the target on staff interaction rate, ideally, would be targeting 100%. Nobody enters and exits unengaged. So lead goal, setting a firm lead goal. And by the way, you can use your exhibit interaction capacity formula, that first formula I showed you, to set a lead goal. As a starting point, I would target that 1 out of every 4 visitors that enters your booth should convert to a lead. So you'd take that capacity times 0.25, and that would give you your lead goal. So let's say that you had a lead goal of 75 for the show, okay? And you captured 50. So you achieved 67% of your goal. You fell short. So again, we got to look at, were we qualifying? Were we capturing? What were we doing? Then you want to break it down by quantity and quality, defining what an A lead looks like, what a B lead looks like, and what a C lead looks like, and then tracking the number and percentage by quality or priority code. This would be another performance metric. How well did we achieve our lead goal, and how well did we do on capturing quality leads, which are two key performance indicators from a performance standpoint. Let's flip over to the money side of it a little bit. Let's get into some financial performance metrics. We said that trade shows are about face, and there is a cost of generating face-to-face contact, whether it's at a trade show or whether it's out in the field. I think we should be calculating this, and it's not that hard to do. So let's say that your total show investment is $13,000. And let's say that you had 100 interactions in your exhibit. Then your cost per interaction, what it costs you to put your company identity, your staff, and your products and services face-to-face with a visitor is $130. Now, you look at that and you think, is that high? Is that low? Is it good? Is it bad? Well, the average cost of a field sales call in North America to put a body in front of a body out in the field ranges from $596 to $1,114. So you're beginning to realize here by measuring cost per interaction that your exhibit program is delivering significant financial value for your company. And I'll show you how to use this metric as we go forward and start measuring ROI. But I think this is something we all should be tracking. It's easy to do. Next is your cost per lead. Same formula. Take your total show investment, divide it by the number of leads you captured, and you have your cost per lead, $260. So according to the last research I could find, the average cost of a North American B2B lead is $283. So in this example, you would be right on par with the average. So that's a good thing to compare it to. But what I would suggest you compare it to are also two other metrics. Number one, what does it cost your company to generate leads through other media, whatever other lead generation media you're doing, and other shows? So you can put all of your shows on a roster and look at and compare cost per lead from show to show. But also, I would strongly suggest that you compare it to the your average sale amount or the value of a customer for your company. For example, if you had a $500 unit of sale and you paid $260 to generate a lead, you've got a problem. Your lead acquisition cost will devour your gross margin, But on the other hand, if you have a cost per lead of $260 and you've got a $25,000 sale or value of a customer, you're looking pretty good. So this is a simple metric to run, and it's a really important one to run. I think every single exhibitor should be running this metric. I'm surprised at how few actually do, okay? The other way you can use your cost per lead metric is when you give your leads to a sales team or dealers or distributors to follow up, you can communicate what the cost per lead was. You can say, hey, I'm handing you 10 leads here from Breakbulk Americas. We paid $2,600 for these leads. If you handed them a check and you said, hey, I need this check to get into the bank, I think they would put the check in the bank. So if you'll share cost per lead with the people you're giving leads to, their follow-up will increase. The urgency and the importance of actually following up will go up. So calculate, compare, and share cost per lead. This one, marketing managers on this webinar today, you're going to love this one. This one also plays into one of the top 2 metrics that exhibitors are using across the board. It is the potential revenue value of the leads you've generated. So let's say that out of your 75 leads, that 25 of them were A and B leads. They were high quality leads. And let's say that your average sale amount is $5,000. So when you multiply these two together, you have generated $125,000 of A and B level potential revenue for your company. Now, when you divide that by your investment in the show, look at this. You have a soft dollar return on investment of $9.60 to every $1 you invested in the show. Now, again, it's only potential at this point, but if you've got a good qualifying system and you're only including your A and B leads, it's a very sound metric. It's a way for you, if your boss ever walks into you, says, hey, we spent, $100,000 on that show. What do we get? Well, here's something you can show them right out of the gate. We generated $125,000 of potential revenue value for the company. Now let's talk ROI here for the final pieces of the puzzle. How much ROI can and should we be getting from shows? Well, as a starting point, if you're not at 1-to-1, $1 in, $1 back, that should be your first target, to get the exhibit program to pay its way so it's no longer an expense. Now it's truly an investment. But that's not exciting, right? You give me $1, I give it back to you. It's better than me taking it and walking away with it, right? But it's not exciting. So once you hit the 1-to-1, the next target is 3 to 5. 3 to 5, $1 in, $3 to $5 measurably back. And once you hit that 3 to 5 target, now as high as you can go. Keep trying to drive the ROI higher and higher. I have some exhibiting clients I work with that are getting a 40 and 50 to 1 exhibiting return on investment measurably. So, ROI is the name of the game. Everyone's talking about, how much trade shows cost and the need to get ROI, but we got to set targets and we have to reverse engineer the outcome of how we're going to get to the return on investment. And these metrics I'm sharing with you today will help you do exactly that. Okay, so let's talk ROI, because there's really 2 types of ROI. The first one is hard dollar. Okay, this is revenue. It's checks. It's cash in the bank. And that can be credited either in full or in part to the show. And it will come usually from a combination of post-show and maybe for some of you at-show sales. And it can be measured either from top line or gross margin. And I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. Soft dollar ROI. This is value that you gain or receive that you can quantify or express in numeric terms. And it's typically in the form of where you've saved money for the company or you've created opportunities for the company. So let's take a look at these 2 metrics and how to actually calculate these. This is top line revenue. Now, to do this, you're going to have to be able to close the loop on your leads. So you're going to have to know what became of the leads you captured at the show. So here's the example. Let's say that it is 6 months after Breakbulk Americas, and we can trace $100,000 in post-show sales from our leads. All we have to do is divide it by our investment in the show of $13,000. That'll give us a net revenue of $87,000. And when we divide that by our show investment 13,000. Look at this. $1 in generated $6.70 of top line hard dollar cash, money in the bank revenue. Pretty good, right? But many of us have CFOs and accountants and controllers who don't care so much about the top line. What they care about is the midline or the bottom line. So we may need to use gross margin ROI formula. So same idea. 6 months after the show, we can trace 100,000. But now we have to back out our cost of sales. And the fastest way to get to your cost of sale is to ask your financial department what your gross margin is on a typical sale. So in my example, we have a 70% cost of sale or a 30% gross margin. So we're going to back that out. So now, right, we've generated $30,000 of gross margin profit from the exhibit. When we divide it by the $13,000 investment, it's got a $17,000 net gross margin exhibit profit. When we divide the net profit by the exhibiting investment, we have generated a 130% gross margin return on investment. $1 in generated $1.30 of gross margin revenue. Return on investment. Okay? Now, let's talk about soft dollar because I showed you a few soft dollar ones like the potential revenue value of the leads you generated. That's a soft dollar metric, right? Here's another one. Cost per interaction savings. So back to our investment here of 13,000. We divide that by the 100 interactions, and we have a cost per interaction of $130. So now we need to compare that to something. So the research tells us that the average cost of a field sales call starts at $596. So I'm going to be conservative and use $596 as my comparative here. Now I'm going to deduct my cost per interaction at the show, and I have cut the cost of putting a body in front of a body by $466 for my company. When I multiply that times the number of interactions, I have saved my company $46,600, or I've generated a 358% soft dollar return on investment. I divide my $13,000 show investment into my $46,600 in savings, and this is soft dollar value. Remember, it's value that we can quantify or express in numeric terms, often in the form of saving. Okay? So the end game of measurement is to create what I would call an exhibiting performance and a ROI report. And it would be a template that you would use across all the shows you do. And it has 13 sections. It has the executive summary. Then it's got the general information about the show. And then it's got your exhibiting objectives that you set and the progress that you've made toward them. Then you would get into your formulas we talked about, exhibit interaction capacity, utilization, your cost per interaction. Then you would detail leads, the goal, the actual, the cost, and the potential value of the leads. Then you would document your marketing efforts, what you did before and at the show, what media, the reach, the response, and the impact. PR. Then you would look, do a little write-up about your exhibit, the design, have some photos, how well did it work? What would you do better for the next show? If you had physical demonstrations or presentations in the booth or around the event, document those. Number 10, if you're doing any form of hospitality or sponsored events, document that. And you can also use some of the metrics I showed you for things like that. So if you held a hospitality event that had 50 customers show up and you spent $10,000 on the event, you could also document your cost per customer entertained. So you can see those metrics I showed you can be adapted and applied for a lot of different uses. Key customers at the event and VIPs that you met with. A competitive summary. Who else was exhibiting and how big was their booth and what were they featuring and where were they marketing? And then insert your show budget with the actual. And you know that tool I showed you. And then your benchmarks and your return on investment actual and projections. Finally, the lessons that you learned and the recommendations on how you can make it better for your next show. Okay, so we have covered a lot of ground here in a very short period. You've got the workbook in front of you. I'm going to open up it for Q&A right now. Be sure, again, to visit the Breakbulk America's Exhibitor Success Training Center. This is free. It's 24/7, 365. Share it with everybody on your team. Download the articles. If you haven't watched that first webinar, go watch it. And at any time you have questions, feel free to reach out to me and your team at Breakbulk Americas. So with that, I am going to take a look into the question queue. And while I do, I am not seeing any questions at this point. I'm hoping that that means I've done a really good job here and I've given you a lot of great information and metrics to put into play for Breakbulk Americas. So on behalf of the entire executive team at Breakbulk Americas and my company here, Competitive Edge, I want to thank you for logging in. I want to thank you for being an exhibitor at the show, and I wish you great success. In fact, let me see, I believe I just did have a question pop in about what time frames should you measure your ROI. Here's the way I think about that. Number one, I think about the frequency of the show. So if it's a every year show, I would want to be running ROI metrics in the 3, 6, and 9 months after the show. But I would also be thinking about the length of my sales cycle. So if I have a really long sales cycle, then I'm going to want to reach out farther than 1 year. If I have a 3-year sales cycle, I'm really not going to be able to measure true ROI until my leads have run through the entire sales cycle. So think about the frequency of the show and the length of your sales cycle as to your ROI measurement checkpoints. And I do think you should have multiple checkpoints. So thank you so much for the question. The conversation can continue on the exhibitor success training on the Ask the Trade Show Experts. On behalf of everyone, I want to thank you for logging in. Have a great day, and we will see you in Houston very soon. Thanks for logging in, everybody.